G'day, Corbinate2000 here. Today I'm going to be going over my Supersonic Siren build, my Mayhem 10 multi-tap pistol Amara build for Borderlands 3. This build revolves around using the multi-tap pistol, which was added in the Mayhem 2.0 update, and transforming it into a really powerful elemental shooting, homing, tracking, run and gun style weapon, while also being quite powerful for mobbing and giving you also the skills necessary to be great at bossing in certain situations when using other weapons of your choice. Though for the purpose of this build I am focusing purely on the multi-tap pistol, as I believe it's one of the most underrated weapons in the game currently. I'll leave timestamps in the description as well as on screen right now to different parts of the build, and yeah, if you just want to jump to certain parts of this build video, go ahead and use those timestamps. Otherwise, just watch through all the way and I'd appreciate that. Anyway, without further ado, let's get right into this build. So starting off with the skills I chose, first thing with the orange tree, which is the most important tree as I spend the most points here. I got 5 points into infusion. This converts a portion of your damage dealt by your weapons into your action skill element, Fire Shock or Corrosive. This is great as this allows the multi-tap and other non-elemental weapons to deal elemental damage, and that's just always a good thing. Plus you get to choose what element that those weapons do now, with being either Fire Shock or Corrosive. Granted it's only a portion of the damage, but it's still better than nothing and it's just a nice thing to have. Next I got 3 points into Steady Hands. This increases your weapon accuracy and weapon handling. These are just nice extra little bonuses. Damage would have been preferable, but you know, accuracy doesn't hurt either. Next got 3 points into Anima. This increases your status effect damage and status effect duration. This is just mostly to go down the skill tree, as I didn't have any, as the other skills didn't really have anything going for them for this build. Next I got 5 points into Tempest. This gives you increased elemental damage, and shock damage does even more damage. It's just more damage in general. Next I've grabbed Dread. Dread increases your gun damage after you grasp an enemy. Killing a grasped enemy will instantly reload your weapons. This is really handy for weapons that have slowish reloads, like the multi-tap actually. This is nice, and the extra damage is always handy. Next I've got 3 points into Indiscriminate. This allows your bullets to ricochet off enemies, and if your target is currently being affected by Phase Grasp, the ricochet chance and damage is better. This is really nice to have just for fun, and it can also just give you free damage against other enemies. Plus, if you want to use something like the recursion, this makes that work really well. But for the purpose of this video, as I said, I'm focusing on the multi-tap specifically. Next, I've got 5 points into Sustainment. This allows your weapons to deal give you life steal as long as it's an elemental weapon. Now, thanks to the recent update, Sustainment now works with non-elemental weapons being affected by infusion, which is fantastic because that means the multi-tap now also gives you life steal when you have infusion and sustainment, which is just really fucking cool. It's survivability. It's Amara's best survivability skill, so it's kind of a must-have for most builds. Lastly, for the orange tree, we've got Forceful Expression. This gives you bonus elemental damage based on your action skill element. Just more damage. It's always a good thing. Also in the orange tree, you'll want to grab Ties That Bind. This will be our action skill. Ties That Bind is basically a phase grasp that when you grasp an enemy, nearby enemies are linked and any damage dealt to a linked target is shared between all other linked targets. This allows you to basically grab an enemy, link everyone together, shoot one enemy and kill everyone around him, or do at least a good amount of damage to everyone around him. It's just a very cool action skill, and it's the one I'll be using for this build. Going on to the green tree, we've got 3 points into Personal Space. This gives you more weapon damage the closer you are to a target. This is always handy to have because it's just more damage. Next I've got 2 points into Clarity. This gives you health regen the lower your health is, and after using your action skill the effect is doubled. This is just to go down the skill tree, it's nothing really spectacular. Next I've got 5 points in the Helping Hands. This gives you damage reduction after using your action skill. and being able to take less damage is always a great thing, so it's just a really good thing to have. Lastly, for the green tree, we've got 3 points into mindfulness. This allows you, every time you take damage, you gain a stack of mindfulness, and with each stack of mindfulness, you get improved movement speed, and you get improved shield recharge regeneration delay, which is always good to have. The movement speed is really important, as I am using the spiritual driver. This is a spiritual driver based build, so having mindfulness gives you more movement speed, and more movement speed gives you more damage, which is always a good thing. Alright, lastly with the blue tree, I've got 3 points into fast hands. This increases your reload speed, your weapon swap speed, and your mode switch speed. The reload speed is really handy for the multi-tap, as I mentioned, it has a somewhat slow reload speed. Weapon swap speed is kind of handy if you happen to switch between certain a bunch of weapons all the time, and if you're using other weapons than the multi-tap, which I recommend you do anyway for any build, it allows you to switch back and forth really quickly. Mode switch speed's kind of meh, not really a big thing I make use of, as mode switching is usually not that slow for me. Next, I've got 1 point into Violent Tapestry. This allows you to gain rush stacks by applying status effects to enemies. Not really too focused on having the status effect chance being increased a lot, I just want the ability to gain rush stacks by applying status effects. Next, I've got 5 points into Do Harm. Killing an enemy now grants a stack of rush, but for every stack of rush you have that is consumed, your action skill damage is temporarily increased. This works really well when combined with Ties That Bind, as this allows the link damage to be further increased. Or at least that's what I believe it does, from what I understand. But it's just nice to have. Next, I got 3 points into Transcend. This gives you improved accuracy and critical hit damage for a few seconds after activating your action skill. Just really nice, as critical hit damage is really nice to have. It's got a rewarding skill. Next, I got 2 points into Restless. This gives you improved action skill cooldown rate. Now, the reason I only got 2 points here is just mostly get down the skill tree a little bit more, and I found it was not as needed to have maxed out, considering I'm using Ties That Bind. A skill that doesn't really, an action skill that has a relatively quick cooldown rate. Alright, next I've got 1 point into Ascendant. This allows all your action skill augments to have increased effects. And since I'm using, and the action skill augment I'm using is Soul Sap. This allows a portion of all damage dealt by Amara's action skill to return to her or an ally as health, and this goes from 30% to 50% with Ascendant. And the reason I'm using Soul Sap is, from what I understand, if you shoot a grasped enemy and you have Soul Sap, you can get some life steal back from that, which is kind of handy. Alternatively, you could use Stillness of Mind to have a bit more crowd control, but really the choice is yours. I just personally go with Soul Sap for more survivability, because why not? Lastly, I've got 1 point into Wrath. This gives you increased gun damage, and the effect is basically doubled after activating your action skill. Fuck, let's try to spit that out properly. Now, the reason I only have 1 point here is because I had 1 point left over. Alternatively, you could put it into another point into Restless to give yourself more action skill cooldown rate if you find the extra little bit of damage isn't that important. I just went with this because I figured more damage is nice. And yeah, that basically covers the action skills and all the skills, which is really nice. Now, going on to the gear, as I mentioned before, this build is pretty much showcasing the multi-tap, and the multi-tap is an Atlas pistol that can be acquired by killing Katagawa Brawl on Mayhem 6 or higher. This was added in the new Mayhem 2.0 update, and besides it being an above average Atlas pistol, it has the special ability to send out a cryo homing rocket at any tagged enemies when you reload. This is just a nice little extra bonus attack if you happen to be using the tracker grenade, which I do recommend you use from time to time. The homing rocket does some decent damage, but it's more of an extra attack rather than a crucial mechanic of this weapon. You get away with just using this like any other normal weapon. The cryo rocket is just a nice little extra bonus. Now the anointment I'm using is the roll under 50% health, deal 150% bonus radiation damage. This gives the multi-tab even more elemental damage considering it has no element, and is a really powerful effect considering you can get this effect all the time if using the front loader shield, which is the shield I'm currently using. This shield reserves 60% of your max health and returns it as your shield capacity. So whatever your max health is, that is converted into extra shield capacity. But this leaves you at around 40% of your health all the time, which isn't ideal as this allows you to have the potential to be one shot by certain attacks, as you are now below health gate. This can be a bit of an issue when facing someone like Wotan, which has certain attacks that can instantly down you if you're below health gate. However, I find the downside of being weaker and being able to be insta-killed a necessary sacrifice for the extra damage the extra radiation and damage anointment has. And it's quite a fun setup actually, as you feel like a bit of a glass cannon at times. I mean, it's a kind of a fun way of playing actually, because it's not like a deathless build where if your shield breaks you go down, because if your shield breaks you can still keep yourself alive long enough for your shield to start recharging. And that's why we've got the points into sustainment, because while you're below health gate you still have extra health, and if you're not insta-killed you can keep yourself alive. And as for the anointment, you want one with one of the action skill and get 50% bonus elemental damage. This gives you even more elemental damage with your multi-tap, or whatever weapon you're using, if you don't want to use the multi-tap for this build for whatever reason. Next I've got the Spiritual Driver. Spiritual Driver allows you to proc a dot on yourself whenever you use your action skill, and the faster you're moving the more gun damage you do. And you ideally want to get one with 3 points into mindfulness to give you the most movement speed you can have, and you'll want one with pistol damage, crit damage, or Atlas crit damage ideally for the multi-tap, or any other good damage based anointments, or even action skill cooldown rate if you want. So that's what you kind of want, and this is kind of giving us the namesake of this build, Supersonic. You're running really fast and you're doing some good damage. Next, for the grenade, use whatever you want, as grenades currently are not scaling with Mayhem 10, so grenades are not here for damage. The main thing you want is the anointment, and you'll want the action skill and 50% bonus elemental damage as well, same as your shield. But the thing with your grenade and shield is you want these elements to be different. You want two different elements. The reason for this is because if you have the same elemental anointment on the shield and a grenade, you're not getting any extra damage by having it match, as they don't stack. So you want two different elements, and you basically just going to go with whatever you can get, or if you're in an ideal world, if you have all the action skill elemental things for your shield and grenade at your disposal, you want one that works best for you in certain situations. My personal pick is shock damage for the shield and corrosive damage for the grenade, and then if you want to go for that's for just general mobbing and general situations. For certain bosses you'd want to switch over to something like fire and radiation if you're going up against a flesh based boss, or maybe corrosive and cryo for armored targets, stuff like that. Lastly, for the artifacts, I'm using the Pearl of Ineffable Knowledge. It gives you bonus damage on consecutive hits, and after 15 consecutive hits you gain an additional 90% damage. This is really nice as it's more damage. This is however exclusive to the Guns, Love and Tentacle DLC, so that is a bit of an issue if you don't have DLC. The other artifact I do like to carry around is a Cutpurse Launchpad. The reason you want to have a Cutpurse Launchpad is to get yourself ammo back, and if you have the Launchpad can send out homing rockets when you slam the ground, and with the Cutpurse with the Cutpurse effect, let's try that again, you can get ammo back from those homing rockets, and it's just really handy to have when using weapons that go through ammo quickly, or in my case using only one weapon or weapon type. As for other weapons you'd want to use, just go with whatever you feel comfortable using on a spiritual driver based build. So some personal picks would be the OPQ system, the recursion, the yellow cake, all great options. But for the purpose of this video, as I mentioned, I'm using the multi-tap. As for the multi-tap itself, you want to look for one that has, the 50%, 150% bonus radiation damage or under 50% health. And ideally you'd want to have one with the highest base damage you can get. I got a little unlucky for this video and got one with, I got a mid-tier damage, but I got the anointment I wanted. I have seen the damage go up to about 6,800, which is pretty good, but I didn't get the right anointment for it, so yeah, just figured I'd mention that. So be on the lookout for one that does around 6,000-ish damage and has the right anointment on it, and then you'll be set. So yeah, that's pretty much the gear. So lastly, I'll be covering my Mayhem modifiers. As I'm playing a Mayhem 10, I get an easy, a medium, a hard, and a very hard modifier. For the easy modifier, I'm using Speed Demon. This gives you more movement speed every time you kill an enemy, and this can stack up to 3 times, as it gives you 50% movement speed for 10 seconds per kill, giving you up to 150% movement speed for 10 seconds after a kill. Combine this with max stacks of mindfulness and the spiritual driver, and you run so fucking fast. That is dumb. I personally go with this just mostly because I really like the idea of running fast. If the extra speed is something that you just can't work with, alternatively I'd recommend using either Big Kick Energy to give yourself more damage at the cost of more recoil and weapon spread, which isn't a big deal if you're using the multi-tap, as you can use the tracker grenade to just have your bullets home in on enemies, and thus you're just getting free extra damage. Or you could use Slayer if you want something that's a bit more neutral overall, which is a really good, and Slayer is a really good modifier anyway. For my medium modifier, I'm using Mob Mentality. This just gives enemies more damage and fire rate when they're near other enemies. I went with this because it's kind of non-consequential. Enemies will do more damage, sure, but it's nothing to that. It's not a big deal. I don't find it's not a real big deal, and yeah, it doesn't add any extra annoying things to deal with. For my hard modifier, I chose Ticked Off. This makes status effect damage against enemies deal 90% less damage. Now, for an Amara build, you might think this is a dumb choice, as you're doing a lot of status effect damage anyway, but I found unless you're using weapons that have a high base damage, and you properly spec into status effect damage is not really that useful. So I find this is a really non-consequential modifier to have, as it doesn't really do much. The main damage you're doing to your enemies is coming from your bullet hitting them, not the dot killing them. It's rare that I have a dot kill my enemies, unless they are stupidly low on health. Last up before my very hard modifier, I chose Buddy System. This will have enemies have a chance of having a small little drone that gives them invincibility, and you have to destroy that drone to stop those enemies from being invincible. This is kind of best of the bad lot, as all the other modifiers I find are way too annoying to deal with for this build. You could use something like Holy Crit for the extra crit damage if you find you're hitting crits all the time, but against certain enemies that have stupidly hard to hit crit spots, or enemies that just pretty much have near impossible to hit crit spots, I personally find that's more of an annoyance than anything. So Buddy Systems is kind of the best of the bad lot. So yeah, that's pretty much the whole build. Now the whole playstyle of this build is basically you want to proc your action skill by not grabbing anyone, grabbing a target occasionally and then just killing everyone, running really as fast as you can to get yourself the most amount of damage. You'll want to occasionally shoot out your tracker grenade just for being able to not have to focus and just focus on speed. Then you could use also the you know, just manual aiming to go for specific enemies if you want. And it's just mostly a typical run and gun playstyle. Yeah, that's pretty much the entire playstyle of the build. You are a bit of a glass cannon as you are below health gate, but that also just adds to the thrill of the build, as you deal a good amount of damage from mobbing thanks to the multi-tab working really well. And for bossing, I do recommend using other weapons, but the multi-tap can work on bosses. It's just a little slower than some other weapons like, say, the Monarch or the Yellow Cake. Otherwise, this weapon and this build works stupidly well for mobbing and is really fun. I wouldn't classify this as the strongest Mayhem 10 build. I wouldn't even classify it as the strongest Spiritual Driver based Mayhem 10 build. But it is definitely one of the most fun, and it utilizes a weapon that is extremely underrated, and I really suggest you give it a try. I mean, if I can run through the takedown, which I struggle to do with the best of gear and the best of builds, on Mayhem 10 using just this little thing, then I'm sure you could have some fun using this for at least some mobbing and stuff. So yeah, that's going to wrap up this video, guys. If you enjoyed it, remember that like button, subscribe to my channel if you want to see more, and if you actually go out and try this build out for yourself, comment down below what you think of it. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you guys later.